Georgie's been feeling more alone lately. She used to think it was just a passing phase, but she's not so sure now. Every day, she does the same activity, helping the boys prepare breakfast for school, nap, and daydream. Sometimes she wonders if she made a mistake by quitting her nursing job to move in with Jim. Their life together feels so dull and predictable. Georgie wants more than this. She craves adventure and spontaneity. Unfortunately, Jim isn't much help. He's either absent or uninterested in making things better. He isn't the man she used to know. She isn't even sure if she loves him anymore. She's starting to suspect he feels the same way. There's one thing she looks forward to. It always makes Georgie feel better. The beach. Every morning, she wakes up early and takes a walk along the shore. She loves the solitude it provides. The sound of the waves and the salty air soothe her soul. One day, she notices a van parked nearby with a dog chained up beside it. The poor animal looks sad and lonely. Georgie approaches it carefully and pets its head. Then, without a second thought, she frees the dog from its chain. The dog bounds away happily towards the water, tail wagging with joy. Georgie smiles, feeling a sense of satisfaction and purpose. Maybe she can't fix everything in her life, but she can make a difference where it counts. Today, like every other day, Georgie gets the boys ready for school. She's taken on the role of a motherly figure. She knows she can't replace their deceased mother, Jim's first wife. She tries her best to be a maternal figure, and the boys seem to like her. Earlier, Jim called to announce he's had a big catch. She could hear the excitement in his voice. He only sounds this way after a successful day of fishing. She knows that the community will be gathering at the town hall to celebrate. They always do this when Jim has a huge harvest. She is aware they don't like her, maybe because of their closeness to Debbie, Jim's deceased wife. She decides to join in anyway. She's tired of staying indoors. As she enters, she sees everyone in high spirits, dancing, and drinking beer. She squeezes into the crowd and spots Beaver, the mechanic who is Jim's friend, a familiar face who's the only one to acknowledge her presence. He tells her that Jim's catch is massive, worth a nurse's annual salary in just one day. She tells him she's a nurse, but no longer practicing. She can tell he's a little tipsy from the drinks he's been having. In this scene, Georgie is back at the house. She's in one of the boys' rooms reading a night storybook to him while Jim is in the sitting room watching television. The boy falls asleep. She enters the sitting room and sits beside him on the couch. He's eager to tell her that he will be making a good 70 to 80 grand on his catch. He says he has shut down those saying his father was better than him. They have nothing else to talk about. It's early morning and Georgie decides to go for a walk on the beach and a quick swim. At the beach, she sees the dog chained to the van but doesn't see its owner. As she is taking a swim, she sees a boat approaching her, and a young man is standing in it, who she immediately knows is the owner of the dog. Georgie swims over to the young man's boat, and he tells her he mistook her for a floating body. This makes her feel uncomfortable. Curious, she asks him why he always chains his dog to his van. He explains that the dog is protective of him, and the chain keeps him safe while he's out fishing. After a brief conversation, he leaves. When Georgie gets home, she meets Jim leaving the house. He tells her it's not safe to swim that early. Jim is walking past her. He says that everything isn't fine and they both need to talk. But it's nothing serious, and she shouldn't overthink it. She is suffocating in this environment, so she decides to go stay at a hotel for a few days and gather her thoughts on her next plan of action. She picks up her key and decides to drive to town. While driving, Georgie begins to hear a noise emanating from the car engine. Her car halts. It's hot and sunny, and she's confused about what to do next. She gets down and opens the bonnet. She hears a car approaching. She turns to the car that is just parked close to her, and she sees it's the same stranger from the beach. She's hot and frustrated by her car breaking down. She finds this young man very attractive. This is a new feeling for her. He walks over to the car, peering into the engine, and asks what's wrong with it. Georgie tells him she has no idea. She may need a mechanic to use a computer to check it out. Unable to get in touch with the mechanic because her transmission is out, she heads over to his truck and finds his dog. She strokes the dog's head. She has taken a liking to it. Seeing her predicament, Lou, the handsome stranger, offers to drive her to her destination. He assures her she has nothing to fear from him. Georgie chuckles and grabs her bag from her car before hopping into his truck. As they drive, she asks Lou what his dog's name is. He tells her his dog doesn't have one. He also says that he needs to sort something out at his house before continuing their journey. They make a detour to his residence where she requests paracetamol for her banging headache. Lou, seeing that she looks tired and hot, suggests that she waits inside where it's cooler while he quickly attends to his errand. She agrees and is surprised to find that his house is filled with books and literature. Lou finishes up with his errand soon, and they begin their journey. As he drives her, Georgie asks him who his favorite author is or if he has any female authors which he loves to read from, but he doesn't give her a direct response. Lou asks her what her profession is. He guesses she must be a teacher. Georgie corrects him and tells him she used to be a nurse. She asks him why he chose a teacher as his first guess, and he reveals it's because she knows a lot of books. He then reveals that she and Jim Buckridge don't seem like a pair, but she tells him she isn't married to him yet. They continue to drive. He inquires what she's going to do in town this sunny afternoon, and she tells him she booked a few nights at the hotel because she needs some time alone. He asks why she's running away from her partner Jim, but she doesn't respond, and they arrive at the hotel. Georgie invites him to join her inside and buy him a beer, but he declines, saying he has somewhere to go. She points out that the exit they used is now blocked, so he reluctantly agrees to her offer to buy him a beer. As they enter the room, they both begin to kiss passionately and give in to their passion, making love. Afterward, she realizes they haven't properly introduced themselves. He tells her he's Lou Fox, and she says she's Georgie and it's nice to meet him. She tells him the offer of beer is still on the table. Lou Fox tries to sleep, so he lies and faces the wall. As he closes his eyes, the picture of Bertie, his deceased niece, comes into his vision. It's a constant torture for him to see her always and relive all the fun and best days they both had. Georgie notices he is worried about something, so she asks him if it's a dog at home or a fish that's making him worried. After spending 3 days at a hotel, Georgie returns home and sees Jim peeling some potatoes. She suggests he chop them up to cook them faster, feeling awkward as she explains that she went away to take a break from everything. Jim reassures her that he understands, but he was worried. He shares that when Debbie, his first wife, received her cancer diagnosis, she also went away for a few days to process the news. Georgie retorts that she's not Debbie, and Jim acknowledges that he knows that. Georgie can't stop thinking about Lou Fox, and the mere thought of him makes her feel alive. She misses him and decides to pay him a visit to his house. As she drives up, Lou is surprised to see her, wearing only a towel around his waist. Georgie surprises him by taking a photo of him, saying she wants to remember him. Lou advises her to leave for their sake, but she refuses, and they make love. They lie down, listening to each other's heartbeats in silence. She breaks the stillness and questions why he is a recluse who stays far from others, and sustains himself by poaching other people's fish. He confesses that after attending a recent funeral, he lost his will to exist, and so he destroyed all of his identification. Georgie finds his words confusing but doesn't push him for an explanation. He then reveals that he wants to take her to a special place full of memories, and leads her through the forest to a clearing covered in gray sand. He explains that this used to be a favorite spot for him and Bertie. Puzzled, Georgie asks who Bertie is, and he reveals that she was his beloved niece. As they lie on their stomachs facing the beach, playing with the smooth sand, Lou Fox and Georgie share their personal stories. Lou explains how his family is banned from fishing, and he has turned to poaching after he and his brother failed at farming melons. Meanwhile, Georgie tells him how she once felt so depressed that she isolated herself on an island, alone until she felt better. Lou Fox then turns to Georgie and asks what they are both doing. Confused, Georgie inquires about what he means. Lou Fox responds by pointing out that they aren't teenagers and should not be playing games, and proceeds to ask about her relationship with Jim. He asks if they are still intimate, and Georgie promises to stop if he doesn't her to. The following day, Georgie is working on her computer at home when Jim calls to report that Boris, one of his colleagues, suffers a mishap and suffers a huge cut. She asks if he's bleeding, and he responds that the injury to his head is quite massive. She hurries over to the ship to try to keep him stable while they await the ambulance. But once again, she is reminded how she isn't wanted by the people of White Point. They refuse her offer of help and medical advice. The following day, Lou Fox goes fishing. He notices an unusual presence on the seashore where his car is parked, and he begins to head back to the shore. He sees his dog lying on the ground, dead. Lou Fox takes a closer look. He discovers that his dog has been brutally slain with a knife, and his car's tires have been punctured. Who could have carried out this despicable act? Lou hurries back to the water, using his binoculars to see two smaller boats making away. Georgie goes to the sea hoping to see Lou, but is surprised to find his car tires punctured and his dog's dead body. She immediately knows that Jim is the one who did this. She runs back home and attacks Jim, demanding to know why he could be so heartless to do that to Lou. Jim tells her that he deserves everything and reveals that he wished Lou's hand had burned the day he touched her. Georgie is so mad that she swears at him, but he asks her to go sober. Meanwhile, Lou Fox is heartbroken and goes for a long swim to ease his pain. He swims a long distance and back. Georgie is at a loss for what to do. She has to see Lou to make sure he's fine. Her car is broken and she needs a car to take her to Jim's house. The only person that comes to mind is Beaver the mechanic. Georgie decides to go ask him for a favor. She goes over to Beaver's workshop and pleads with him to lend her a car for one night. She promises to bring it back the next day. Fortunately, he takes pity on her and gives her one of the cars he just finished fixing. She drives to Lou's house, but he isn't there. She then sees him staggering back from the woods, beaten by rain and bruises from the weeds. She hurries to bring him in, gives him a wet scrub, and treats his bruises. Georgie takes him to bed. He asks her how she came to date a man like Jim. She says she saw Jim for the first time in Bali. She was attracted to his kids and played with them, and then he came around after his wife's death. She admits she knew she was settling with him as she was emotionally vulnerable. During their conversation, he reveals to her a heartbreaking secret. After the accident that killed his brother and sister-in-law, their daughter Bertie was kept alive on life support machines. Lou was pressured to remove her from life support, and although he initially refused, he eventually gave in. He tells Georgie that he feels like a burning, screaming wreck and that he will never recover from the trauma. The next morning, Georgie wakes up early while Jim is still asleep. She drives the borrowed car back to Beaver's workshop. When she arrives, she calls out to him, but there's no answer. To her surprise, Jim emerges from the shop. In a fit of anger and pain from what he has done to Lou, she screams at him to stay away from her, calling him an animal. She begins to walk away, and Jim drops a bombshell. He tells her to call her sister because their mother has passed away. Georgie and her family aren't close-knit, but the news of her mother's sudden demise hits her hard. She rushes to their house where she learns from a staff member that her mom drowned in the pool and died before they could get help. The tragic news shakes Georgie to her core. She struggles to come to terms with it. When she meets her sister Jude, who is always critical of her choices, including her decision to stay with an illiterate fisherman and be the mother of his kids, their tense conversation only adds to Georgie's awkwardness. Things take a turn for the worse when their dad arrives with his new wife. Georgie is hurt by this and angry to learn that they came to her mom's funeral together. Accusing him of not caring, she lashes out at her dad, who denies her accusations. The knowledge that her mom lay dead for over 12 hours before being found breaks Georgie's heart, and she struggles to cope with the weight of her loss. Meanwhile, Lou Fox is grappling with intense feelings of sadness and depression. Despite being familiar with these emotions, this time, they are overwhelming. Desperate to escape his inner turmoil, Lou packs a few clothes and sets off on a journey that he may not return from. Georgie's heart races as she returns to find Lou gone and fears that Jim, consumed by jealousy, may have harmed him. Without delay, she rushes to Beaver's shop, hoping for answers. Georgie inquires about Lou's whereabouts and whether Jim has done something to him. Beaver assures her that Jim had nothing to do with Lou's disappearance and suggests that Lou may have left on his own. As night falls, Lou finds himself hitchhiking with a drug-addicted military amputee. They park in a deserted field, and Lou drowns his sorrows in alcohol, eventually passing out. In his unconscious state, Lou relives the tragic day when his brother and sister-in-law died. They were all together at a bar, singing and having fun until Lou noticed Jim staring at his sister-in-law. Lou's brother, Darky, accused his wife of infidelity with Jim, which resulted in a physical fight between Lou's brother and Jim. As they drove back home, their car was struck by another vehicle, and Lou lost his only remaining family. In this scene, Georgie is still at Lou's residence, searching through his belongings in hopes of finding a clue to his whereabouts, but comes up empty-handed. It's nighttime when she spots Jim approaching and immediately confronts him, telling him that Lou isn't around and that she has no idea where he could have gone. Jim pleads with her to come back for the sake of their boys, who have already lost their mother, saying that her departure would be too much for them to bear. Georgie tells him that she isn't leaving the boys but rather leaving him. Jim argues that the boys won't see it that way and begs her to return home so they can work out their differences. Meanwhile, Lou Fox wakes up alone in the deserted field. The military man who gave him a ride had left him there when he passed out. Lou gets up and hitches another ride to see a local pilot who can help him with his trip. Lou Fox pays the pilot with all the money he has on him and says he's on a one-way trip. As they fly high above the water, the pilot asks if he wants to be dropped at the plateau and how he hopes to come back. Lou isn't interested in having a conversation with the pilot. The pilot notices this and tells him there are a lot of people like himself who want to go far from the trouble they are passing through. Upon landing on an island, he starts exploring the surroundings. He walks around a large rock, and an old, emaciated-looking man confronts him and queries if he is a lawyer, a miner, or from the government. Lou, taken aback by the question, asks the man why he would assume a lawyer would be in such a place. The old man responds by asking where Lou is from, and upon learning that he is from White Point, he invites him to his camp for the night. Lou is aware that the old man Menzie is offering him an act of kindness, as it's getting dark and unsafe to travel alone at night. Upon arriving at the camp, he spots a tall, dark man approaching him with a guitar. Menzie introduces the man as Aixie and asks if Lou would like to play some songs using Aixie's instrument. As Lou strums the guitar and sings a tune, memories of performing with his brother and sister-in-law flood his heart. The old man Menzie joins in with the singing. That night, Lou has a restless sleep, plagued by vivid flashbacks of the tragedy that took the lives of his loved ones. He vividly recalls the horrific scene of finding them lying unconscious and covered in blood. The terror and fear he felt during that moment still linger in his body, the pain still fresh. The next day, feeling barely rested, he prepares to embark on a journey to clear his mind. To purge his mind of his trauma, he has no particular destination in mind. As he contemplates the next route to take, Axay approaches him and offers his boat. He has heard Lou Fox's story from Menzie and understands that he needs the boat to aid his journey around the island. Lou Fox is grateful for the offer and begins his journey using the boat. He drinks water from the hills, forages for food, and catches fish. On the other side, Georgie feels that Lou isn't coming back wherever he is. She checked his house for clues but found none. She is hanging out with Jim and the boys, and she has noticed that Jim has become kinder and more attentive to her. As she sits by the sea, he joins her and asks if she's still determined to look for Lou. She says yes but doesn't know where to begin. She also tells Jim that she believes him when he says he didn't harm Lou or cause his disappearance. In a bid to persuade her to stay in their lives, Jim offers to help her search for Lou, believing that whatever feelings she has for him are fleeting. Georgie goes back to Lou's residence, gathers all the instruments that Lou used to play with his family, and sets them ablaze, convinced that holding onto them was hindering his progress. Feeling restless, she makes her way to Jim's house. Upon arriving, she sees the boys packing their boxes and is puzzled by this. She asks Jim where they are going. Jim explains that he's taking them to his sister's place and reveals a letter from Lou that he received a few days ago. The letter contains a clue about Lou's whereabouts, Cape Levick. Jim tells Georgie that he's coming with her as he has some relatives there. Boris will take over his business for the time being. They both board a flight to Cape Levick. As they arrive there, they have no clue where Lou Fox is and no means to get through with him. Georgie makes a poster with his picture and goes around the town asking the residents if they have seen anyone like this. They run into luck as they meet the pilot who conveyed Lou Fox to the island. He admits he took him there but believes he would be long gone from there at this moment. Georgie tells Jim she thinks he may be at the Coronation Gulf, for that was the place she was once at and she told Lou about it. She informs Jim she would love to go alone from here. She asks him to truly divulge why he's helping her look for Lou Fox even though she is convinced he hates him. Jim confesses that when his first wife Debbie was sick he had a brief affair with Sal Fox, the wife of Lou Fox's brother. The night of the accident a fight broke out at the bar in Darky. Lou's brother threatened him, so he and Beaver chased them with his car. Darky was drunk and lost control of the car, which led to the demise of his family. Georgie couldn't bear to look at Jim's face, so she leaves him. Lou injured his foot while attempting to fish, and unfortunately, he doesn't have any medical supplies to sanitize the wound and prevent it from getting infected. In addition, his injured foot limits him from most physical activity. He tries to stop the bleeding by tying a dirty sock around the wound, but this method poses a risk of infection. He is hungry and his strength is failing. He manages to sail the boat toward the end of the island, hoping to see someone who could help him. Georgie is determined to bring Lou back and embarks on a solo mission to the island. She hires an experienced boatman who knows the terrain of the island to help search for Lou. Despite searching around the island on the first day, they are unable to find him. Lou Fox's body is drained of strength, and he is plagued by hunger, sickness, and weakness, causing him to slip in and out of consciousness. He stumbles upon a camp and enters it, unaware that Georgie remains behind and is out searching for him with the boatman. He gathers what little food he can find and retreats to a nearby cluster of rocks, where he sits and promptly collapses. When he comes to, he is consumed by vivid hallucinations of Bertie. After an unsuccessful search for Lou, Georgie and the boatman return to the camp to find the food pantry scattered and in disarray. Georgie immediately senses that Lou must have been there, and she frantically calls out his name. Lou is nearby and can hear her voice, but his disorienting hallucinations make it hard to distinguish what is real from what isn't. The boatman receives a call from the pilot informing him they need to make a quick exit, as the weather is getting worse. Georgie asks to be left on the island so she can continue searching for Lou, but the boatman tells her it's a bad decision as she wouldn't survive, and even Lou, wherever he is now, wouldn't survive it. As they prepare to go, Lou leaves a record of Bertie singing in the camp and she gets on the plane. The voice of Bertie emanating from the camp attracts Lou, who drags himself to the camp. Then he sees the plane about to fly, and he tries calling for their attention to rescue him, but they don't hear him. He begins to swim, then Georgie spots him and asks the pilot to descend. She quickly swims towards him and rescues him. She pulls him to the shore, and she knows she has found her true love and will never let go.